Would you like to see an X-ray of your soul, an X-ray of your emotional infrastructure? Well, just like the body, today with scans, with X-rays, with different types of technologies, we can see the inner workings of what makes us tick. We have a blueprint that will give you a picture of the spectrum of your emotions, an understanding how they work and what you can do to improve them. Check out the description below, the special Omer book, 49 steps, personal refinement, character development, understanding and cultivating the very nature of your emotional being. The social influences that are exerting themselves upon us, imposing themselves upon us. Take just a very basic thing, the idea that people are selling something to you. That means they have to convince you to buy something, which means not necessarily the best thing for you, but they want to convince you it's the best thing for you. And it may be a good thing for you, but how do you really determine? So there's the ongoing emotional manipulation of our minds and of our hearts to determine what we value. And I was just reading an article the other day about how journalism has become so bastardized and so compromised by the fact that right now it's focused on getting audiences. Whereas once, at least there was the illusion that you're standing for something. Now it's about how many people are going to watch something and what kind of headline will go viral. And topics that not necessarily have any journalistic value, but we know will get a lot of people watching, is the determining factor, even in some of the most prestigious and sophisticated journalistic outlets. Some people think Trump epitomizes it, and of course the media feeds into it because it's like an ongoing circus. So when you look at the world around you, you start seeing a type of focus where we're being taught to be more superficial to focus more on the superficial than on the real, to focus more on the sizzle than on the steak, more on the package than on the product, more on form than on function, and more on matter than on spirit. You can go on and list. And when you have forces from so many different directions, and now they have access to us 24/7, what is it doing for you and your own self-value? If you're being told that if you buy this, you're going to be happier, and if you don't, you're going to feel deprived, it's essentially a message that you don't have what it takes to be confident. You need to drive this car, look this way, travel to this place, purchase this item. So we're in a world which is on a offensively, we're not in a neutral world. We're in a world that we are constantly under attack and assault on our psyches. Now I know it comes across almost like a doomsday and fire and brimstone, but I don't mean it that way at all. I mean in a subtle way. But what does it really do for our self-esteem and self-confidence? How much of our decisions are really determined from within? How much are you generating and saying, one second, let me determine what is valuable to me, and I feel confident and strong in my convictions, and then let me go find what I need. How many decisions are we making that way? It's a pretty good question to ask yourself. On a daily basis, from the morning you awake till the moment you go to sleep, how much are you really deciding coming from within? And if it's not coming from within, rest assured it's not building your self-confidence. Because confidence is built from within. Esteem is built from within. Learning to trust yourself. Learning to value yourself. And I could speak also from personal experience, my own experience and what people I deal with. This is one of the most precious and rare commodities today, is having self-value, to value yourself. Now what I just described was the adult world. You throw into the equation now our childhoods, our young formative years. And if you grew up in an environment that you were constantly being criticized, invalidated by parents, by adults, by educators, by people who are supposed to nurture us, you can rest assured you're not coming into a level playing field as an adult. Because you're already on the defense. You already start second-guessing yourself and you're wondering whether your decisions are right. Children naturally, as we shall discuss more at length shortly, are naturally confident entities. They're born, they have no reason not to be. They expect love. Not because of a sense of entitlement, because it's a natural thing, like a flower expects water. A flower expects that the gardener is going to nurture and water the garden. child naturally expects, not in words, but just by its disposition, by its personality, that it will be taken care of. And that's the way it's meant to be. That's the way we are created. We are not self-sufficient when we're young. 9 months, we're in our mother's womb, we're completely nurtured and cared for. And then when we finally come out of our mother's womb, we still are in a state that needs a lot of nurturing, a lot of protection, a lot of caring and love to be able to cultivate that sense of confidence in ourselves. So in a healthy situation, a child grows up feeling that, feeling wanted, feeling validated, valued. When a parent says, I will spend time with you, not even saying the words, that the child senses, you care about me, I'm more important than other things. When a parent runs out of the house and gives the child less attention and it becomes consistent that way, there's a message there. It doesn't make a difference how many gifts you buy the child and how many videos and how many trips you may take them and how many candies and ice creams you give them. The bottom line, a child will know that you have other things that are more important. And children are very simple. When they get that message enough times, they begin to say to themselves, maybe I'm not that valuable. And it's not about an ego trip. It's about the garden, the flowers will begin to wither if they're not watered. Now, unfortunately, we live in a world where this is unfortunately more common than not, that most of us have been deprived to some extent. I'm not going to say that everybody to the fullest extent. In the most extreme way is obviously true abuse, true absenteeism, true invalidation in the full sense of the word, in the painful sense of the word. And that doesn't mean that the situation is hopeless, but it means it's an uphill battle. Because once a person is already, as a child, has developed a sense that I'm not really valuable, and I can't really trust my own feelings because I used to come home from school all enthusiastic, and my father who was drunk, or my mother who was neurotic, would criticize everything I did because of their own issues and their projections. As much as therapy you go through, there's that knee-jerk reaction, I'm doing something wrong. And I met people that even without anyone criticizing them, they immediately say, what did I say wrong? I'm sure you have situations sometimes you say something, you look at someone and say, okay, what did I do wrong now? Why would you assume you did something wrong? Reminds me more than once this happened. I've been sitting with someone in the private sessions, counseling, and I remember one particular case where I brought the person a cup of water, and I put it down, and as I lifted my hand, she flinched, and for no reason. It wasn't like, I said, why'd you flinch? She said, I thought you were going to smack me. So I said, why would I smack you? Did I indicate any hostility to you or anything? She says, no. But in my life, my childhood, when a hand was lifted, it was usually going to be a slap. And she's developed a knee-jerk reaction. Now, this may sound crazy, but we all do things like that. You begin to react. When something happens enough times to you, you will begin to build up a reaction, a reflexive reaction to whatever situation you're in. Now, if this happens consistently, remember, children, like all of us, are resilient and we can absorb and be flexible to many situations, but if it happens consistently, and it's like an assault on our consciousness, on our psyches, and our value, we slowly develop a sense that I'm guilty until proven innocent, when in truth you should be innocent until proven guilty. And by contrast, people who have been nurtured and have built that self-esteem, it doesn't mean that they won't have moments of doubt and they won't have moments of questioning themselves, but their status quo, their so-called equilibrium is one of a certain measure of confidence. So a lot of all this discussion has a lot to do tremendously with our own childhoods. And you can't avoid that issue. You talk about self-esteem, it's almost textbook. You have to, the first thing, almost look at what kind of childhood did you have. And not because we're looking to dig up a can of worms, or to look for trouble. It's simply because you have to understand what has shaped you. And then you can intervene and do something about that. So essentially, to sum up what I've said so far, is based on the principle that half the problem, the awareness is half the cure of a problem. Before you deal with solutions, you must have awareness of the situation. Basically what we call a diagnosis, an evaluation. Just like it is on the physical sense, you come into, let's say, a person is bleeding, God forbid, they come into a hospital, emergency room, or something else. The first thing that we need to figure out what's going on. Where's the bleeding coming from? You have to stop the bleeding. You have to first evaluate before you intervene. And anyone without the training says, you know what, oh, maybe this. That would be very dangerous. You can create more problems if you start guessing. So the first thing is awareness, diagnosis. So the same thing here in self-esteem issues, first thing is awareness. What are the factors that are contributing right now, presently? It could very well be our childhood. Okay, that's one. We'll go through the usual suspects, so to speak. Number two, it could be the oppressive environment of your social state, meaning right now, presently, you may be working for an oppressive boss. You may have very unpleasant employees. You may have people that you're dealing with, family members or others that are toxic. I mean, I'm just using extreme examples. I don't mean to, I'm just trying to make the point. It could be a little milder version, but you are presently, basically it's like someone who is suffering from an illness and they're continuing to consume or breathe toxic air. So obviously whatever you do is not going to help because they have to stop continuing the diet or the environment that they're in. So it's critical to understand these factors. So if you list the suspects, I mentioned some before, but I'll just sum it up. As I said, childhood experiences, number one, must be looked at because that tells a lot. Number two is what kind of situation you find yourself in right now, presently. The type of work you're at, what are your pressures, who's demanding things of you, what are the expectations, what do you think are the expectations? Because that all is having a direct impact on your own confidence. Because if the expectations are overwhelming and unrealistic, so you're constantly saying, look, I continuously fail. Take a third area to look at is your relationships. Where do you stand in the area of, courtship, romance, love, sexuality? That bears tremendous amount on our own self-esteem because are you successful in that area? Are you not? Are you desperate? Are you doing things that are self-destructive because the need for love? Do you not know how to find the proper partner, a proper relationship because maybe you don't have the standard or you don't have role modeling, etc.? I'm not going to go through the list of every usual suspect, obviously, just general categories. But there's no way to deal with self-esteem and self-confidence issues if you don't look at these things because they're actively having impact in your life right now. So it's just to sit here and I'll give a talk about what self-esteem is on a theoretical level without addressing what factors are shaping you as we speak. Is like I said earlier, it's like someone trying to detox from one end, so they have like a detox tubes pulling out the toxins. On the other end, you're feeding yourself toxins. So what are we going to gain? There's expression in the Talmud that says, Tovel v'sheretz biyodei. It means somebody's going into a mikveh. A mikveh is a ritual bath to purify themselves, but they're carrying a toxic thing in their hand, and they don't even realize it. So they're bathing themselves. It's like somebody going to take a bath, but they're oozing with all kinds of grime or oil, and they're just, first you got to stop the flow of the negative before you bring in the positive. It would be like trying to bring new furniture into your house when it's full of dust and dirt and grime. First you got to clean up, at least create some type of environment, then you can bring in something fresh. Which of course, even though this sounds almost like it's almost absurd, but very often, I'm sure you'll find this. We all do these absurd things. That's what the human condition, there's a measure of absurdity to it, where people say, I don't know, I keep trying new things and it's not working. And they don't realize that they're still maintaining old habits while they're trying new things. Like the line that I always, I don't know who coined it, I think I coined it, but it's some combination of different things I heard over the years. Maybe I'm not trying to take credit for it, maybe it's plagiarism of some form. But the line goes like this: if you think what you thought, and you say what you said, and you do what you did, what will you have? Can you figure it out? What you had. You'll have what you had. If you think what you thought, and you speak what you spoke, and you say what you said, meaning you continue doing what you did yesterday, in thought, speech, and action, what will be the results? The same results. Now, I'm not sure if this is a famous line. Insanity is somebody saying, doing the same things and expecting different results. Or as they say in the healing world, if nothing changes, nothing changes. Now, these simply be like simple idioms and simple maxims and ideas, but it's easy to give, as we all know, it's easier to give advice to others than to yourself. And the fact is we're all guilty of this, of our blind spots and our subjectivity that don't allow us to see sometimes that we are our own worst enemy. And even though you're sincere in looking for change, but you're not changing anything as you seek that change. And there's no way around that. People say, I want change, but I want to change anything. Tell me the logic in that. It doesn't work that way. If you have a bad habit, you're going to have to change something to get rid of that bad habit. And to say, I'm just going to assume a new habit and forget about the bad habit, but if you have the bad habit, it's going to come back to haunt you. This is a challenge, but the beauty of I shouldn't say the beauty. The good news is, as I said, awareness is half the cure. Even if you may not be able to completely overcome your past patterns and routines and habits, but the first step is awareness. So very often I'll tell someone, I'll say, listen, we're not looking to change, that's who you are, but at least be aware. Be aware that every time someone lifts their hand, you feel someone's going to slap you. No, that's not natural. I'm not suggesting suddenly change your whole emotional makeup. That's how you're wired right now. But until you recognize that this is an issue, you're definitely not going to do anything about it. So the first step is what we'll call, some psychologists call it like the cognitive life raft. At least in your mind understand that's not the right way to react. I still react that way, but at least I understand it's not. It's like the Baal Shem Tov says something very fascinating. The great mystic, the Baal Shem Tov, he says that there are two types of darkness. There's darkness and you know it's dark, and the dawn will come, and the light will come. But then there's a darkness that's so dark that it conceals that it's dark. He calls it double darkness. In the verse in the Bible it says, haster aster, a double cover. It covers the fact that there is something to cover. And then you can convince yourself night is day, ugly is beauty, something negative is positive. That's when there's the real distortions, because you don't even know that you don't know. So the first step is saying, 1 second, to convince yourself, for example, that you're experienced in the area you're not experienced is a perfect example. But then you come to an awareness and say, 1 second, you know something? I'm not experienced in this area. There's nothing wrong with that. Maybe I need help. Maybe I need to go to a professional. That awareness is the first step to all growth. No one's asking you to become perfect. But very often people with low self-esteem, low self-confidence have to develop an illusion that I can do it. A person with self-confidence is the first person that's going to admit, I can do it. I know it sounds paradoxical, but that's exactly the point, because a confident person knows what they're good at, and they're very clear about it, and they're very clear that here's some things I'm not. So I hire someone or I consult with someone that has a clear view on the matter. A person with low self-confidence, you'll find, often does not go for advice because they feel they have to compensate. To go back to the childhood experiences, when your father or mother or any adult continuously berated you and criticized you and said to you, what's the matter with you? What do you start doing? You stop going for help. You start putting on a show to prove to your father you don't need anybody. I can do it. And it's really a fabrication. It's a fabricated sense of toughness, or what's the word I want to use? Bravado, that you feel I can do anything. Very confident people are the first to say, here's my strengths and here are the things I need help in. Because they have a clear sense of their boundaries, of their strengths, and of their weaknesses, which we'll be discussing as well. So, to sum up what I've said so far is this. Self-esteem goes to the core, essentially, of who you are, what has shaped you, and what is shaping you presently. And until you're ready to step back and say, okay, here are the factors that contribute to why I second-guess myself, why I have difficulty with commitment, why I have difficulty with making decisions. Doesn't mean you have to expose yourself and go announce it and advertise it. We're talking about between you and yourself, or between people you trust, in a very confidential and discreet way. That's the first step. You have to be able to identify. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just identify, because that becomes the beginning of defanging the enemy, is recognizing the enemy. You know, in warfare, the key to all warfare is not how powerful you are, or how many arms you have, or how many firepower. It comes down to often confidence, psychological warfare. If the enemy thinks you're stronger, you may be weaker, but you already won. And the same thing is emotionally and psychologically. When we are not aware and we think the enemy is much bigger than it is, then the enemy does become bigger, because you empower, you're fueling your enemy. So it's critical to be able to defang the enemies by awareness. It's like you shine a light on something, the maggots and the parasites run away. Because they thrive in darkness. Our own weaknesses, our fears, our inhibitions, and including our low self-esteem and self-confidence, thrives when we don't understand what's going on. Because when you're confused and you're lost and you don't know, when there's clarity, you always begin to build confidence. It's like he'll say, you know what? I'm afraid of taking upon myself this and this new project, or take upon myself a new goal. And when you're asked, okay, why are you afraid? So you list the whole reasons, because I could fail at this, I could fail at that, all the different reasons. How will you ever build the courage to take on this challenge? So people who have low self-confidence won't. They'll just back off, retreat, and say, I'll take on other challenges. But then you'll discover a pattern that this repeats itself many times, because it's not about this particular project. Of course, in each case, you're going to find excuses why this is not possible to be done. That's what a non-confident person does. A confident person looks at it, analyzes it. Doesn't say necessarily it's easy, it's difficult, but I've analyzed the measure of its difficulty. Here are the challenges, and now I'm going to figure out how to get around them. So they don't see anything as being impossible. They see it as, okay, it's formidable, but I will first get a lay of the land, understand the challenge, understand the enemy, so to speak, and from there I will be able to then assess what to do. Now, there are obviously real situations where anyone, even a very confident person, says, this may not be an area I want to take upon. It's too difficult. But it's not coming from weakness. It's coming from strength. It's coming from clarity that, you know what, I explored, and this is maybe not something I should be doing. Not due to retreat, due to clarity. So the key to the confident person is the clarity they have. They look at the situation, assess it for what it is, not what it appears to be. Because if you rely on what it appears to be, it can look a lot bigger and bigger monster than it is. So that is why shining a light and clarity is critical in diffusing any type of adversarial situation. But all these are the tools of the confident person who goes in and says, okay, I'm going to find clarity. What we call due diligence. Do research. Look into it before you just say no. I find this very often when it comes, especially in the dating scene. And someone suggests someone to someone, and they say, no, it's not for me. I said, did you look into the person? No, I just have an instinct. Okay, an instinct. Fine. Okay, then you push it a little. Am I describing anyone here? Okay, fine. Good. And so then if that's the case, how do you know maybe your instinct is off? What is it based on? Maybe it's just your fear of not succeeding. Maybe you've been hurt enough times, you're not looking to be hurt. There's nothing wrong with saying that. But to say that requires courage. That alone requires confidence, to say I don't have confidence. A non-confident person usually will not say that. They will not say it. A confident person will say very clearly, this is waters. This is the downside of technology, huh? Okay, so where were we? So the first step, I was talking about the dating scene and person instincts and so on, is to be honest with yourself and looking at the factors and the forces that are shaping and defining how we make decisions. And though it takes work, and I will discuss that shortly, but you really want to get to a point once you identify what you can do to counter that. So let's get to the bull by the horns. Let us indeed say that someone grew up in a home and environment. In their formative years, they were invalidated, one way or another. Sometimes it can be quite extreme. Children of divorce suffer from this because often they blame themselves. That's what children do. And they feel something the matter with them. They feel they're the cause. Parents often don't help by subtly suggesting and blaming and so on and projecting. So once you identify any of the above, then the next step is, what do you do to counter it? The answer is you need to have a very heavy dose of validation to counter the invalidation. But here's the challenge. People who have been invalidated, in a way, become their own worst enemy. And they usually don't like to hang around people that are confident. So they often misery loves company. The friends and others they meet feed their own self-perception. That's what happens. And you have to be fully aware of that. It's one of the biggest challenges. Because like I said earlier, we don't change our thoughts and our speech and our actions just because we want to. If a person does have has been invalidated and does not have a healthy sense of self-value and self-esteem and so on, what will happen will be, no question, what will happen is that they will so-called look unconsciously, not consciously, look for ways to confirm their own negative self-image. And we all do this. And it's a very difficult thing to fight because obviously no one's going to do it deliberately. No one's going to say, I'm going to wake up in the morning, I'm going to figure out how to undermine myself today. Does anybody have that on their to-do list? You write it on your to-do list? Really? Okay. That bad I've never seen. I mean, there are people, by the way, that do that. That's when a person really is self-loathing. But we don't do it consciously. That's the problem. If we did it consciously, then at least we could address it. We do it unconsciously. We almost like set ourselves up to make sure that you can that you're not gonna you're gonna fail at something. You undermine it in the first place, so you don't really fail. This happens very often in relationships. Many people, when it gets too close for comfort, and somebody's getting closer to you emotionally, what will you do if you're a person that's lacking self-esteem? You're gonna sabotage it before they do, because you don't want them to hurt you. So you end up hurting it. This is typical behavior. Now, what I'm describing are things that are easier to identify, but there are many things that we can't identify. You know, simple things like even mundane things like what kind of jobs we choose, what kind of challenges we'll take upon ourselves. A person who's been invalidated from young age is usually going to cut themselves short from really achieving what they're capable of. So it's almost like a given that someone lower self-esteem, lower self-value, the less challenges you'll really take upon yourself, because you don't want to get into a situation where you may fail and you doubt yourself too much. So you don't shoot your bar you keep very low, and if you're very smart, what you do is you cover your tracks so no one really can notice, and that's that. And then you live out your life, never really living up to the potential you're capable of. That's how sad it is. So how do you counter this? You counter this by being very honest and candid and blunt with yourself, and always critical to have an objective friend that you invite to kick you in the pants, not in a bad way. You invite in to be able to challenge you, and what you want to do is counter it by not allowing yourself to do that. An example, taking on a challenge that you would not want to take on naturally. I'm talking about a good challenge. I'm not talking about doing something that's, God forbid, self-destructive or anything like that. Maybe that's exactly what you need, is to take on a challenge that you thought you're not capable of, and why don't you try? You know, you swam in waters to this point, why don't you swim in a little deeper waters? And I'm not talking about doing anything reckless or crazy, even though that could also not hurt sometimes, to do something a little nuts. But the key thing is to get out of your comfort zone, because that's how changes happen. Shifts happen when you shift something. There's no way around that. And that is the little secret that nobody wants to hear. Everybody wants to say, I want to change, but I don't want to shift anything. Well, that doesn't work. It doesn't work. I'm not suggesting cold turkey you shift everything. You take it step by step. One of the suggestions I always make is like in a very simple level, like when, let's say, you have your wires tangled up. You know what I mean? Or your hair is tangled. Or something else is tangled up. I mean, physically even. How do you untangle things? So most of us, we get impatient, and we just start pulling and and what happens? It gets more tangled to the point you can't even untangle it any longer. The secret to untangling things is patience, and looking at the edges and the extremities, untangle the part of the wires that are easy to untangle. And then you can isolate that area that's most difficult. It sounds like ridiculous. It sounds like so simple, but most people simply don't do that, because they either are so emotional about it, they just want to fix it. It's called simple process of take upon yourself a challenge that maybe is not the hardest one. If you're going to try to attack and say, you know what, I have low self-esteem, I'm going to go to a boot camp 7-day boot camp where they tell you after 7 days and $20,000, you're going to have self-esteem. Rest assured, it'll probably make it worse. It's like they say, why are these books all bestsellers? They keep telling you, here's the 10 steps to a healthy love, 20 steps to self-esteem, 30 steps, whatever. Why do they keep selling? Because obviously they don't work, or else the books wouldn't keep selling. Why would someone have to write a new book? People with self-confidence usually don't buy these books unless they're going to write a book and they want to see how others are doing it. So the point I'm making here is choose challenges that are out of your comfort zone, but they don't have to be the ones that are the most difficult. And we all can identify some things that are more difficult and because small victories lead to big victories. That's the key. Make small shifts, and the small shifts will allow you to make bigger shifts. And then there will come the point where you'll have to deal with the most entangled part of your life, and that may be directly your own childhood or other things that are undermining your own confidence and your own self-value and trust in yourself. And it becomes easier when you've untangled most of it, because then you have the last step, the last so-called frontier, makes it a lot easier. So that's one way to go. And this is easy to do any day, tomorrow morning, tonight. Make a commitment. You'll join a new class, you read a new book, but it has to be something that's fresh and not part of your past patterns. That's how you counter, especially deep-rooted invalidation, and that's a result of absenteeism or other childhood experiences that cause us to, in our formative years, to lose self-trust and self-confidence. Now, just for the record, even though self-confidence and self-esteem are interchangeable usually, they actually don't mean exactly the same thing. I mean, there's even debates on the topic, but my take on it somewhat is like self-confidence, there are people that have low self-esteem but can have self-confidence. It's usually not the other way around. Why? Because self-esteem really gets to trust, it's really being able to value yourself, esteem. Do you have esteem for yourself? Do you respect yourself? Confidence can be taught. In this particular area, there are people that are very good at doing something, so they're confident in what they do, but doesn't mean they necessarily respect themselves. They've learned to be good at something. And it's still valuable, because at least you have that, but self-confidence is more about trusting yourself, trusting I can do it. I can drive a car. I've done it enough times, so I have confidence in driving a car. Is it self-esteem? Not necessarily. You can be a person of very low self-esteem and be a great driver. I mean, it sounds a little odd what I just said, but I'm just giving you an example. My point is you could be good at something and be confident in it, but simply because you're trained and you know you have the skill. Self-esteem gets deeper into the self-valuing and trusting yourself. Valuing and esteem for yourself, not just trusting, but valuing yourself. But in the context of our discussion here, both obviously I'm interchanging them because they're both the broad sense of the term. We want to have both. And self-esteem obviously gets much more to the person who you are. So one of the ways, so the key is identifying and countering it. If, for example, let's just take a very simple example. Let's say you play tennis, and whatever it is, the way your muscle or your physiology is shaped, you have a quirky way of striking serving a tennis ball, or a certain way of throwing a bowling ball. So what are you trained to do? If it's like, let's say, it tends to go to the left a little too much, you train yourself to adjust, let's say, your angle or your other things, so it compensates for no one's going to change you, because it's very hard to change someone's natural habits. But you can adjust. Just like when you see something's going a little too much to the left, you adjust accordingly. Psychologically, that's also a key thing, knowing how to navigate. And knowing how to navigate is the critical component in really building that self-confidence. So if you're a person, for example, that your initial reaction is that you hesitate or you retreat or you're afraid for whatever reason, and you know that, again, as I said, you don't have to force it upon yourself, but the shifts you have to make have to be direct proportion to the areas where you feel weak. So in the area where we have the lack of that confidence, you have to find things that validate, which means getting involved, let's say, in a project that's out of your comfort zone, but you see, you know what? I'm working with people that are competent. I'm learning from them. It's like incubating. You hang around with people that are better than you in something, and you learn from them. Now, a truly the low self-confident person say, I don't want to hang around successful people because it makes me feel like a failure. They'll laugh at me. It'll be glaring, so I'd rather hang around losers. That way it doesn't stand out. Again, nobody makes any bumper stickers or business cards that announce, I'm a loser and I like to hang around losers. But subtly, we make these little decisions. You go to the places that you're more comfortable. Whereas when you're countering lack of self-confidence, what you want to really do is go into areas that you're not so comfortable, but hang around people that are confident in what they do. And assist them, help them. There's nothing wrong. Nobody is born an expert in anything. You learn from those that are good. And it rubs off, and their confidence rubs off. So these are things that we can actively do on an ongoing basis. And it just needs a little creativity and a little attention, figuring out where it is, because it's very hard in a group of people to give specifics because each of us have our own little challenges. But now, to take upon yourself something and say, you know what, you know that, let's say, you'd love to play a musical instrument, but objectively people tell you you're never going to do it, whatever reason. It's not natural to you, it's too much difficult, some people are more naturally inclined to it. So you have to choose your battles too. Sometimes to set your mind to something that's completely unrealistic is not a sign of failure, but that you're unable to do it. It's just a sign of clarity, of awareness, where you should take upon yourself. So the first thing is really to see, and that's why an objective mentor can help in this regard, where are your potential strengths that you've not yet really actualized? And that can come with something that in your own mind and feeling you feel you really could be good at, you're not good at yet. And the question then is, what game plan can you make to be able to get there? This is the process of growth. And it's not about achieving perfection, and it's not about suddenly becoming the super confident person from the non-confident. It's about building, it's like muscle conditioning. Nothing's done overnight. You build. As I said before, small victories breed bigger victories. Success breeds success. Small untangling things leads to bigger untangling things. It's the rule of the game. There's no reason to feel that you have to cram it all and succeed in one shot. It's step by step by step. And don't be afraid of making a mistake, because that's one of the big fears of, unfortunately, children growing up in homes. The terror. If I made a mistake, my father's going to come home and he's going to kill me for it. And as children, we are terrified of these things. I just remember some of my little fears, and they're completely irrational when you get older. And this is, thank God it was only a one-time thing, but I remember it. I remember I was in summer camp, and let's put it this way, I was somewhat of a troublemaker. Not the worst type, but disruptive force, as they say today. And I don't even remember what I did, but one of the other counselors came over to me and says to me, because of what you did, you're going to have to come to dinner tonight in your pajamas. That's what he said. And as a little kid, what was I, 9 years old, 8 years old, you don't think rationally. I was terrified. And I didn't call my parents, I didn't call anyone, because whatever, children don't feel that they can call for help because they feel they're under the control of this spell. That's part of the problem. And I remember all day, I can't tell you, I was just in dread. Those dreads, which of course afterward turned out to be completely, basically he didn't even remember what he said.
Scattamo stanotti, viri come balla, sutta e fanali chi si scidica. Ballamo stanotti, salta come un'anna, chi pettini di luna in sciolla. Gira musica, gira e non si ferma, come una galla do vento aita. Attira con narina, tamburello e abbacia come sua figliola. Scattamo stanotti, viri come balla, sutta e fanali chi si scidica. Ballamo stanotti, salta come un'anna, chi pettini di luna in sciolla. Sinni e Tunu, i voti si danno, Tuna poco gli putia, sin da fettunu i cappotti russi e si ricordano da notti buona. Scattamo stanotte, vieni come balla, su te fanali chi si scidica. Ballamo stanotte, salta come un'anna, chi pettini di luna in sciolla.